Hi there, welcome to DIY Comics FAQ. I'm GE Gallas and I'm here to answer all your questions about indie comics, graphic novels, webcomics, zines, self-publishing, storytelling, you name it. If you like my channel, don't forget to subscribe. Alice at Summertime Alice on Twitter asks, I know it's a big question, but how does one grow their audience? That is a big question, but I am more than happy to answer it. Number one, the biggest rule of thumb I would say is that you need a lot of patience. It's not an overnight thing unless you have some kind of viral video, viral image, viral comic. It's most likely not going to happen overnight. I was kind of shocked to look at my Twitter account and realize that I have been on Twitter for 10 years now. So you might look at my Twitter and be like, wow, she has a huge following. But I didn't start out that way. I've been working at it slowly for 10 years now. So you just have to have patience. That's rule number one. So the easiest ways to grow your audience is to have a Twitter and Instagram account, especially if you're trying to grow your audience for your webcomic or your indie comic, your self-published comic, or you're going to do a Kickstarter. I would definitely suggest trying to grow your audience, even if it's just a couple hundred followers, before you try anything like a webcomic or a Kickstarter. It's perfectly fine to have a personal and or sketchbook Twitter or Instagram. You just put up whatever you draw and hopefully that'll draw an audience to you of some kind. To just have something as simple and small as that before you try posting your big project, because you might be disappointed that not that many people are looking at your webcomic or your Kickstarter that you've put so much hard work into. So once you have your Twitter and Instagram accounts, you're going to notice some similarities and some differences with them. I have so many amazing followers on Twitter. I really appreciate it. It's amazing that all these people are following me and I get to interact with them on a day-to-day basis. So I have a very nice following on Twitter, but my Instagram, which is a newer account and I didn't really put much thought or effort into it for a while, it has a much lower amount of followers. So I only have about 2,000 or 3,000 followers on my Instagram when I have I want to say 40,000 right now on Twitter, 40,000 plus. So it's a huge difference. But at the same time, I don't get that many likes on each of my tweets. I would be happy if I got like 5 to 10 favorites / likes on my tweets. That's a lot for me. But sometimes I'm lucky enough to get like 50 likes or 70 likes, and then I'm like, wow, that's great. But on Instagram, on the other hand, even if I don't have as many followers, I get way more likes. I would say I get 50 to 100 likes per post, and every time I post I get more and more. So it's just, Twitter and Instagram work differently, so you're going to get different results from both, even if you're posting the same type of content on both your accounts. One way to grow your following is to just post regularly. It doesn't have to be every day, but if you could post a couple times a week, even if they're just sketchbook drawings or, rough drafts of things, or if you're working on a nice drawing in Procreate and you want to do how Procreate, if you're familiar with it, always records a time-lapse video of your drawing. So anything you want to throw up onto your Instagram or Twitter, art-wise, comic book-wise, is great. It doesn't have to be perfect. Don't be afraid if it's not perfect, just post it, because people are going to see it and they're going to love it. If you don't post it, they're never going to see it, and so you'll never get eyes on that drawing or illustration or whatever it is. So don't be afraid to post. I get a lot of people asking me, like, on direct message DM on Twitter, like, oh, do you think I should post this? I'm not sure. And I'm like, go ahead and post it. Don't worry about it. You're not going to get anyone mean, saying this drawing sucks. I mean, someone has to have a lot of time on their hands and be pretty bored to want to, like, troll your small art account. I mean, even as someone who has a nice size following on Twitter, I almost never get mean comments, and if I do, I just block them. It's not worth my time to fret over it. So don't let the haters discourage you. You're gonna find that there are people who want to cheer you on and support your art, even if it's just with a like or by retweeting it. So don't be afraid to post your art and comics on Twitter and Instagram, and you'll grow your following that way. Another really important thing about growing your following on Twitter and Instagram is to follow other artists. I can't stress this enough. Even if you just take a minute every time you log on to Twitter, or a minute every day to follow 3 new artists, that way you're gonna get mutual followers, and they're kind of gonna act like your cheerleader and you'll be their cheerleader, and support each other. If one of your mutuals has a Kickstarter, that's a good time to help them retweet their Kickstarter and try to help them fund their Kickstarter, and hopefully they'll remember that you helped them and do the same when you have your own Kickstarter or other big projects that you need help spreading the word about. So mutuals are super important. I wouldn't just follow anyone. Follow people that you admire, and try to interact with their posts, even if you just put a heart eye emoji as a comment for a drawing that you like. I end up doing this a lot because it's kind of difficult to come up with a good compliment, but if you just throw in some heart eye emojis, then the person who drew it is going to know that you enjoyed their work, and they're going to feel good about having posted that work and having drawn that work and shared it with their audience on Twitter and Instagram. So don't be afraid to use that heart eye emoji or any other emojis to help celebrate other people's work, and that'll, I think, pay off in the end, because you'll make a friend, you'll make a mutual. So that's another way that I try to grow my following, and I think it's an easy way that you guys can grow your followings as well. Another way to grow your following on Twitter and Instagram is to use hashtags. I mean, this is kind of an obvious thing, but please don't be afraid to use hashtags. There are great hashtags in the art community, great hashtags in the writing community. So you can use, there's of course hashtag writing community. I sometimes use hashtag amdrawing. Just all sorts. You'll see art thread, art share, hashtag art share thread, artists on Twitter, artists on Instagram hashtags. So just look out for those hashtags that you see on your own Twitter feed, and you use them yourself. And I just use hashtags that have anything to do, whatever I can think of that has to do with my Twitter post, especially for my graphic novels. If I'm tweeting about The Poet and the Flea, for instance, so The Poet and the Flea is about the poet painter William Blake, so I definitely use the William Blake hashtag. It's a great hashtag because there are so many William Blake fans out there, Blakeans, Blake scholars, so they get really excited. I'm always on the Blake hashtag because there's so many interesting things going on there. So if you happen to be drawing or making a comic about a historical person, using their hashtag is really great. Like, I'm sure that if you were to draw a comic, for instance, about William Shakespeare, and you used hashtag William Shakespeare for when you post an illustration or comic on Twitter or Instagram, you're going to get a lot of eyes on that, because anybody who's like, I want to look into the Shakespeare hashtag, then there's a possibility that they're going to see it, and that's such a great opportunity to get your work in front of the right audience, an audience that's interested in the topic that you are drawing and writing about. So same with The Plague and Doctor Came, my Plague Doctor graphic novel. I use the Plague Doctor hashtag a lot. This has been a really interesting learning experience for me because, you know, William Blake is a really specific person, but a plague doctor, even though it's a historical entity, it's not a specific person. So it's kind of interesting. I've kind of noticed that there aren't as many people using the Plague Doctor hashtag on Twitter as there are on Instagram, and it's interesting what types of stuff they're posting on Instagram. A lot of people are getting Plague Doctor tattoos, they're cosplaying as Plague Doctors, they're drawing their own Plague Doctor characters. So that's been a really interesting kind of research into what audience might be interested in my graphic novel, The Plague and Doctor Came. So I think that if you experiment with different hashtags like this, you might learn something about your audience as well and be able to cater your tweets and posts to that audience as a result. There are always different illustration hashtags going on at different times of the year. A big one is hashtag Inktober for October. It's where there's a prompt that you follow, so every day is a different prompt, and you do a drawing usually in ink, thus Inktober, and post it a new drawing every day of the month of October. So that's a really great thing to participate in because so many people do Inktober. So you're gonna not only find a bunch of different artists to follow their work, but if you use the Inktober hashtag and do that Inktober drawing every day of October, you might get a lot of people to your Twitter account. So that's another thing to think about. There are different hashtags that are similar to Inktober, so keep an eye out for that when you're on Twitter. So that's a really great way to try to grow your following as well. Another easy and great way to grow your following is to participate in art share threads. So if you go hashtag art share or hashtag art share thread, you'll find a lot of different people doing this. A lot of different accounts on Twitter do this. So it's basically just a thread where you share your artwork. Be careful though, because each thread has its own rules. So be sure to follow those rules. Like sometimes it might say, oh, be sure to comment on at least one post from another artist, or be sure to retweet one of those artists on the thread. So be sure to follow those rules because you don't want other people to get mad at you for not following the rules. But art shares, if you do a couple art shares every week, you know, participate. That's a great way to find other artists, mutual followers, and it's a way to get your art seen, especially if you don't have that many followers yourself. And you can always do your own art share. That's a great way to engage with other artists on Twitter. I do an art share on my own page, my own Twitter account at GE Gallas from time to time, and I always get like a couple hundred people participating, which is really great. It's so fun to do. It can be a lot of work if you're getting hundreds of people because you want to try to comment on the art that they post and share the art that they post, but it's definitely worth trying out if you want to grow your following. Another way to grow your following is to connect with people pre and post convention. So what I mean by this is that if you're going to a Comic-Con, if you're going to a local zine event, you know, a zine fest, if you're going to Small Press Expo or Chicago Alternative Comic Expo Cake or something along those lines, you might want to look at the hashtag for that event on Twitter before the event so that you can friend/follow other artists going to that event, other people attending that event, and that might help you find them at the event. I do this a lot, you know, I'll go, for instance, the DC Zine Fest is one of my favorite events that I go to every year, so I'm always looking at the DC Zine Fest hashtag, and I try to follow other people going to Zine Fest. And then at Zine Fest, when I'm tabling, when I'm exhibiting my work at Zine Fest, people will come up to me and go, "Oh, you followed me on Twitter," or, you know, "Oh, I recognize you from Twitter." So that's a really great way to find new friends and artists to follow. And then of course after the event to also go back to that hashtag and follow other artists, like their posts. You know, people always put up photos of the event or, you know, videos of the event, so you know you can interact with those posts and hopefully make even more friends even after the event. So I highly encourage this, especially if you're going, no matter the size of the event. Like Zine Fest is a smaller event, Small Press Expo is a bigger event, and I do that with both every year. So just whatever events that you're going to that are comic book related, that's a great way to grow your following as well. As I mentioned, both Twitter and Instagram have kind of their pros and cons. I get more likes on Instagram, but I have more followers on Twitter. So there are, you know, you kind of have to be patient, as I said before, be patient with it, because you're going to discover like, oh, maybe I have this, you know, group of followers here, but you know, more eyes on this post on Instagram than on Twitter. So you have to experiment with it. But I definitely encourage you to do both Twitter and Instagram if you have the time. You'll be able to figure out if you should spend more time on Twitter or on Instagram once you've experimented a bit. I really tend to do way more Twitter than I do Instagram, but I still have my Instagram because there are some people who are on there and they're not on Twitter. So I encourage you to try, at least try both. And if you have the time to do both, then do it, and you'll have a bigger following that way. Another way to grow your following is to be consistent if you are posting a webcomic. So this is going to only apply to people doing webcomics or thinking about doing webcomics. I did some webcomics in the past and have had mixed results with those. For Pawn My Soul, I used to post it as a webcomic on Tumblr, and I did that for 2 years. I posted one page every week, and I had a decent following. It didn't do as well as I had hoped, especially because there was kind of this mass exodus from Tumblr, and so a lot of people left Tumblr, and so I've kind of shut that down, and I'd like to try again on another website. So it's a lot of trial and error, as this whole do-it-yourself comic book stuff is a lot of trial and error. But if you're gonna do a webcomic, I would suggest trying to post a consistent schedule, like I did, one page a week. That's not a very big amount, so some people might get kind of impatient for the next page. I know a lot of people do 2 or 3 times a week, which is a lot of work, so you need a lot of dedication for something like that. And the best thing you can do if you're going to do a webcomic is to build what we call a buffer, which just means, oh, maybe you have 30 finished pages before you even start posting anything online. So that way, if you're posting 1 or 2 pages a week, you'll have kind of a head start to try to keep up with it. So maybe even, like, if you're really, really dedicated, you could even finish an entire comic, like a 50-page comic, a 100-page comic, and then once that's finished, you could start posting it as a webcomic, so you would never miss a day. But you don't have to do it that way, but it is really helpful to have that buffer so that you don't stress out and you're like, oh no, what am I gonna do when I don't have the next page to post? So that's a good thing to think about. And so if you are able to post once or twice a week and every week for a long time, people will recognize that and follow your comic because they don't have to wait around for months and months for a new page. They know that every week they're going to get 1 or 2 new pages. So that's another really helpful way to grow your following. I could probably talk about growing your following for hours upon hours, but I'm trying to keep these videos somewhat short. So I hope that I've kind of hit on all the highlights of growing your following and kind of giving you some ideas of where to start, where to improve with your Twitter and Instagram accounts. Please let me know if you have more specific questions about this topic, because I would be more than happy to answer your questions. So if you have questions, please comment below. I will look at the comments and answer them in a future video. Or you can always tweet me your questions at GEGALLAS. If you like what I'm doing here, if you like my episodes and you want to support it, please subscribe. It's free. It's one easy click below. So please subscribe and you will get notifications whenever I post a new episode, which I plan to do every Tuesday and Thursday. That's all for now. See you next time.